gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Koufax.
What do you mean there's a post-credit scene?
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and I, too, keep my horns filed down.
You got to. Don't want to be poking nobody. This week, we are talking the brand new Hellboy. It wasn't enough that we were out in the theaters last week to see Shazam. This week, we're going in yet again. Hellboy. I think it's just called Hellboy, right?
Hellboy. It's called Hellboy 2019.
Hellboy, parenthetical 2019. And we'll be talking about that today. And everybody's been asking, where's Ron? Where's Ron? And we're going to see if the shoes, those were some big shoes to fill, or a big, I don't know, did he ever have a glove on that hand at any point? Could you fashion a glove for the hand?
For the red right hand of doom?
Yeah.
Impossible. Or as the French say, c'est impossible.
Oh, gosh. Boy, I keep telling people this show has an international flair, and usually I'm just wrong, right? It's usually just a bunch of made-up crap. But I think, now, I think we're international trendsetters. I'm ready for our Canada numbers to start going up, quite frankly.
This one's for you, Quebec.
Oh, my goodness. So we're going to be talking Hellboy this week. And we do like to thank everybody that helps support the show over at patreon.com/HMP. Those folks, you're actually going to be getting something special because we are having to record some early stuff here. So even if you're at the $2 level, that's a pretty low level there, you'll get early shows. You'll get next week's show this week, so you can jam as much HMP in your ears as you can possibly stand.
Keep those bicentennial $2 bills rolling in.
Heck
Adam
yeah,
collects
boy.
those.
Patreon.com/HMP. So now, before we get this show going here and everything, we do have a listener email. We got a couple emails today, but we're going to do this one right at the top of the show. So let's go and do this.
Bale's here.
And this one comes to us from Tim, and it's entitled Crestfallen.
Oh, no.
It fills my heart with sadness to hear you guys talk week after week on the after show, patreon.com/HMP. Donate today. He said that, not me, by the way. About what you're going to do next. Sometimes deciding to scrape the bottom of the TC barrel to fill slots. Yet, you have yet to touch either version of Superman 2, be it Lester or Donner. What's a fella gotta do? Descends into the Adam Portrais on the Umbrella Academy episode level of depression. Stay super, Tim. Tim, thanks for that email, buddy. And I've put that into the rotation. I don't know if you noticed it on the calendar there, Bruce. We'll be doing that in May, I believe. So because he's
are we doing
point.
the Donner cut or the theatrical release?
Can we find the Lester cut anymore, or is it just all Donner cut?
Yeah.
No. The Donner cut's the one that's kind of weird. You have to go out of your way to get the Donner cut because it's not all had post-production, so it doesn't look great, but it's interesting to see.
Well, I'll say this. We've got enough time between now and the 1st of May, so maybe we'll have a chance to see both or whatever. So but we'll see. But certainly Superman 2, we've done, Superman the movie. That was a very early on, and I think we did 3 and 4. So where the heck's 2? You know what I mean? He's got a good point in 2.
And we've done Return, and we've done Man of Steel, and we've done BVS. We've done everything.
It's
except
literally
for
just about every major Superman movie but this one. So yeah, we'll get on that one, man. So
that is pretty weird that we haven't done it.
I think it was also one of those ones because with this show, initially when the show started and everything, I think one of our big major thoughts was like, oh crap, we're going to go through superhero movies so fast, we're not going to have enough time, and we wanted to save heavy hitters and stuff until a bit later in the history of the show. Nigh on 5 years now, maybe it's time we cover Superman 2.
Have we done Burton's Batman yet? Like the first one?
No, we haven't.
30 years, man. 30 years this summer.
Okay, we'll line that up probably with the release date. I bet that's pretty close to clear or right around that area. So we could probably, again, 5 years in. Let's go ahead and tap that one out too.
In 2 weeks, Dinger Zone, I'll just start naming off all of the other movies that came out in 1989.
Oh, you're taking my shtick. I've been working on that.
Summer of '89, everybody. So we'll come. I'm not going to close up the mailbag because we have an email later on in the show. But let's go ahead and run that trailer there for the newest Hellboy.
He warned us that something was coming.
If there is ever an end in this forever war, it will be because of you and your strong right hand. I'm on your side!
Sorry, my bad.
We're the line in the sand. We fight against the forces of darkness. This is it.
We're expecting a sign that says secret headquarters.
Oi, I need some ID, love.
Are you serious? You made me a damn weapon. I just wanted to help you become the best you.
Some dads get their kids Legos.
Haven't we got to be saving the world or something?
Does it do anything special?
Yeah. It smashes things real good.
You are mankind's best and only hope.
I thought we were supposed to be fighting monsters, not working with them.
Who you calling monster, pal? You look in the mirror recently?
He's an asshole.
Sorry! I interrupt!
On the contrary, you've arrived just in time.
Alrighty, that was the trailer for Hellboy, our new release review. Here's the IMDb plot line. As we know, IMDb always 100% correct in everything they say and or do. Based on the graphic novels by Mike Mignola, Hellboy caught between the worlds of the supernatural and the human, battles an ancient sorceress bent on revenge. This is directed by Neil Marshall, starring David Harbour, Mila Jovovich, Ian McShane, Sasha Lane, and more. Well, let's get down to it. We've covered Hellboy a couple times on this show, but you know you got to do it, man. Bruce, what do you got for us this week?
Hellboy has been in comics for 26 years, so it stands to figure that he's had a lot of supporting characters over the years. We got to know several of them from the Guillermo del Toro movies, like Abe Sapien, Liz, and Johann Kraus, just to name a few. But there are plenty more, so the recent film decided to use an almost entirely new supporting cast. Take, for example, Ben Daimio, for whom Ed Skrein had been originally cast, I guess because Neil Marshall wanted to make the character an Englishman, but in the comics, Ben is a Japanese-American, so a Korean-American was cast in the role, though the character remained an Englishman despite the casting. Also, I'm curious if Japanese folks are unhappy about someone of Korean heritage being cast in this role. I'll just leave that hanging there because I fear going too heavily into Portrais territory there. Now, in the comics, Ben is a former U.S. Marine, or a former dead U.S. Marine, if you want to get hyper-specific, assigned to a rescue mission in the Bolivian jungle that was numbered D16F84188 on June 10th, 2001, to save a bunch of nuns that had been captured by a fundamentalist group called the True Path, though up until this point, the True Path was a peaceful political group that never engaged in any kind of violence. The mission went awry when the true culprits, a native jaguar cult who murdered the nuns, attacked the group. Shortly afterwards, a shapeless entity made itself known and slaughtered them until only Daimio remained. The incident led to him being severely scarred on the left side of his face. He then collapsed and died from his injuries. He had some horrific visions of a giant jaguar spirit that told Daimio that his new life was yet to begin. 3 days later, Daimio's corpse was recovered and scheduled for an autopsy. However, he came back to life just prior to the autopsy and clawed his way out of the body bag. After a brief period of recovery, Damio was transferred to the Pentagon Special Ops and began acting as an informal consultant to the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense. After Dr. Kate Corrigan and Abe Sapien requested leave during a storyline called BPRD The Dead, Damio left the Pentagon and joined the BPRD as a field team commander. He spearheaded the relocation of the Bureau from Fairfield, Connecticut, because, I mean, come on, nothing good stays in Connecticut.
Amen.
And he took them to this old mothballed Center for Defense Research and Development in the Colorado Mountains, a secret facility he became aware of during his time in the Pentagon. Lobster Johnson is another Hellboy stalwart. The Lobster was a vigilante who worked in secret in New York City during the 1930s. The public believed that the Lobster was only a hero of pulp serials and comic books, but in truth, he was a real man who faced gangsters as well as paranormal threats. The Lobster had a reputation for violence, such as killing mobsters and burning his trademark lobster claw symbol into their foreheads with the palm of his gloved hand. The Lobster's final mission was an unsuccessful attempt to prevent the Nazis from launching a space capsule at Hunt Castle, Austria, on the 20th of March, 1939. He arrived seconds too late to stop the launch, but he managed to force the roof of the castle closed, but the space capsule just burst through anyway. A big explosion happened and fire completely burned down the castle, and some German soldiers died. The evil Nazis died. No one survived, including Lobster Johnson himself. But this was not the end of Lobster. He became one of the world's most powerful ghosts ever to exist, one that could fully manifest into a form as tangible as if he were still alive, but with the added bonus of not worrying about being killed, as he was already dead. One of the most beloved Hellboy stories is one titled The Corpse. It is a story in which Hellboy rescues a baby stolen by fairies and replaced with a changeling. This baby is Alice Monaghan, a freckled, red-haired Irish woman who grows up to join the BPRD and eventually become a romantic interest of Hellboy's, which is kind of creepy, but relationships involving demon spawn often are creepy. Nimue, the villain of the story, also has comic roots. Also, the movie doesn't make it real clear, but Nimue is the Lady of the Lake from Arthurian legends. In Hellboy, The Wild Hunt, Hellboy receives an invitation from British noblemen gathered to hunt giants who call themselves the Wild Hunt. Meanwhile, a restless fairy army awaits the resurrection of the Queen of Blood, who is just so happens to be Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, and she's soon going to rise to lead them in a war against Hellboy and humankind. Having joined the Wild Hunt, Hellboy and companions ride to a bridge where they're supposed to ambush a party of giants, but his fellow huntsmen betray and attack him, declaring that the devil shall never sit on the throne of England. So I think that this shows just how much this most recent film is devoted to putting the comics on screen. So now it's time to decide, does it matter?
Now this movie came out this weekend. It has a production budget of reportedly $50 million. And
it looks like it cost more than that, so I'm happy to hear they did that well.
It does. Like they kept it low. They were looking for around 16 to 20 for this first weekend, and it got 12.
There was nobody in the theater when I saw it today. I mean, I could sit just about anywhere I wanted to.
Now, I did go Thursday. I went Thursday night, and there was for a 10 p.m. screening on a Thursday night, there was a decent number of people in my theater. I'll say it wasn't full by any means, but a decent number for sure.
Ours was about what I would consider average for a new movie that's not like a tent pole. You know, it was about half full, which is kind of typical for, less wide, mainstream movies, less wide release type movies. Also, this was rated R.
Yes.
And I don't know how much that impacted the turnout, but the first question I think I'd like to ask before we get too much in this, did this need to be rated R? Now, I don't mean does this version of the film deserve an R rating. I just mean, did this movie need to be rated R?
I say no, but I'm glad that it is.
I am going to speak a lot more about this. Here is the thing, right? So if you have a PG-13 movie, which Hellboy has been PG-13 both other times that this character has been on screen, and then you shift to a rated R version of the character, there's something off-putting about it. And not when the violence comes from the evildoers. That part wasn't hard to digest. It's when it's Hellboy causing the destruction and putting a pole through some giant's eye and things like that it makes it a little different. I can't exactly put my finger on why it looks wrong, but I think it's just because when we first saw this character, we did not see this sort of mayhem from this character. And, I don't know whether or not that's a bad thing or a good thing. Maybe the first two Hellboy should have been rated R. I don't know the answer to that. But what I can tell you is that watching this movie, it is off-putting when you see this much destruction to beings being done by your main character.
I think, first off, if you don't plan to wedge some chowder buckets in there, you really, really need to be careful with the R rating.
And here's the thing with Mila Jovovich, it's amazing that her chowder buckets weren't in it. She's very
chowder bucket friendly. Yeah,
she's very chowder bucket friendly for sure.
And she had on that loose shift that easily could have, let one of those bad boys flop out here or there in some of the action scenes, and it didn't.
I was just surprised because I was waiting for it to happen. I'll be honest.
And most of the violence is against quote non-human entities. So I think if they just toned down some of the profanity, which were all just exclamations, it wasn't like Deadpool where a lot of the profanity is necessary for the blue humor that he uses. Like here, it's just people screaming out F-bombs when they could have just been screaming out some other kind of bomb.
And that's another thing too, is when Hellboy drops an F-bomb in this movie, it's off-putting.
Yeah.
And I know that he does it in the comic books because I've read just about everything that they've made when it first came out.
But I think at least in his early stories, they did the old comic book thing of the squiggly characters instead of actually having the profanity, which is what Marvel's done with Deadpool forever, and you can get away with that in comics, but in movies you can't. I just don't understand their decision-making process in making this rated R. I think they hurt the box office more than necessary, and I don't think that we have the movie to say that you couldn't tell this story without it being R-rated.
Perhaps.
Yeah, all you have to do is not show that much CGI blood. There's so much CGI blood in this movie.
And, they're non-human characters, so you do like they've done in some other movies where you just make the blood green or blue or something, and then you can show all of it you want. I mean, we have a weird, the whole American Motion Picture Ratings group is just weird about what bothers them and what doesn't. So, you gotta have the R rating if you want chowder buckets these days. But since this had no chowder buckets and you didn't really need the Deadpool type stuff going on, PG-13, I think they make another $5 million this weekend.
That's
Arthur, the descendant of Arthur, who had Hellboy's mom. You do see her naked.
Well, I must not have been watching closely enough because I didn't cover my kid's eyes. I took my 11-year-old to see this.
Wow.
Yeah. I had confidence that it wasn't going to be justifying an R rating, and I think it was right.
But listen, your kids have seen much worse than this.
Yeah, they
much
see all
worse.
these rated R horror movies. Ever since they took away the shower scenes from horror movies, I let them watch most of what they want to.
Joe Bob Briggs had a real big rant about that in last week's last drive-in.
Right?
Oh, yeah, it was a whole big thing about just like, why is this not a thing anymore?
Yeah. Underrated writer, that guy. He's really a good writer.
Seeing him live this next weekend. It's pretty.
Oh, nice, man.
Pretty stoked.
Nice way to celebrate Easter.
Oh yeah, and my birthday.
Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of this movie so we can get this train moving forward. But this starts off with one of the more
spoilers, by the way.
Oh yes, for new listeners and stuff, because we always have these with new releases and everything. We will be spoiling everything from the movie here on out, so do keep that in mind if you don't want to be spoiled.
But I will say it's pretty darn faithful to the comics compared to the Del Toro movie. So if you're familiar with the comics, you're already going to know how this turns out. But we get this really, really clumsy intro. like sometimes, and we were talking about this, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe last week, talking about how good the Watchmen intro was, how good the X-Men Origins Wolverine intro was, whether the movies that followed were good or not. This one's a pretty clumsy one. It feels rushed. And also, I would say once the movie gets going, I think you could probably follow it pretty well without this intro. It is one of my least favorite examples. It's a good example of a bad way to do like the recap prologue intro thing.
I was a little bit concerned with the start and everything because it does have that kind of, overwrought sort of like, hey, here's sort of our flashback way of giving you, with the narrator and everything, all the backstory that you need. And I think a lot of this movie in post, and I'll talk about it as we go on here, in post decided to add a lot more, flavor to the story itself, and then never felt like it was quite happy with what was on the page and then what was eventually on the screen before they, finished the edit and everything.
Not only that, but this was a very, very difficult set because the creatives on this show were fighting the entire time that they were making this movie.
Interesting, because I think a lot of the creative work worked for me. The production design, the art, I think worked for me. Well, I'll be curious to hear what you guys think. But this intro, though, I didn't like at all, and it really, really had me set up for failure before the movie got started. Also, the fact that the distributor, was it New Line, Lionsgate? Who distributed this?
Lionsgate.
It seemed like they had almost zero confidence in this movie. I just kind of feel like it was shoved in on a crowded weekend. I feel like there was very little marketing. It just has the feel of something we made it, so we got to just do a dump release on it almost. I feel like they had no confidence in this film.
I think I get it. I don't want to go too deep dive into my thoughts and feelings on it just yet, but this is not a character that is super well known. I mean, the fans who like Hellboy love Hellboy. I would say that I am, although I am a comic book reader, I am a light fan of this character. I can go years without picking up a BPRD or a Hellboy comic book.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, the Hellboy in Hell, the Hellboy with the Arthurian legend involved with him, all those things never appealed to me or even worked for me.
Yeah, that's two story arcs, The Storm and The Fury, I think they're called.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then Hellboy in Hell followed that up. Yeah.
And when they were on all that stuff with those titles, I steered clear of them completely because immediately I was just like, no, thank you. I'll read something else. And so now that we have the movie version of this thing, I was like, oh, so that's how they did it. Because I figured that they were pretty close to the source material on it. And am I right? Is it pretty close?
Oh, yeah. And I'll also say that my impression's definitely not the only one out there, but Mike Mignola, I think of him as an artist first and a writer second. And a lot of the joy of Hellboy isn't so much the elaborate plot lines, but I just love his art, and he really likes to draw these wild creatures, and his art is surprisingly peaceful compared to the way the movies are made. You don't see extended fights and action sequences. He really deals a lot more with cleverness and just loves drawing these fantastical creatures, and that's why I think Guillermo del Toro was a great match for this property, because I think of him as a visual director first and a storyteller second.
Very much a monster lover.
Yeah, sure. So I just think that their personalities meshed well, and it made sense that they worked together on this. But I don't know much about, is it Neil Marshall?
Yes.
Neil Marshall.
Yeah, I don't know much about him. You guys might know more than I do, but I just wasn't sure what to make of this whole thing. At first, I tried to have a little bit of excitement. Then my expectations went way down with the lack of support it seemed to be getting from its distributor. And it put me into really kind of a good place to have super low expectations, and the movie is better than that. And I'm not saying it's great, but I enjoy spectacle and I have a little bit of fun. I like the cast, even though I wasn't sure, as much as I like David Harbour in Stranger Things, I wasn't sure that he was Hellboy, because Ron Perlman is such an iconic Hellboy. He's a weird looking dude, and Hellboy's a weird looking character, and they just kind of seem like a nice match. And David Harbour maybe isn't weird enough looking. Took me a little getting used to with that. this intro with all the Arthurian stuff, King Arthur and Nimue and all this stuff really set me off. But I was absolutely getting into it when next thing you know, we're in Mexico at a luchador wrestling match and he's wrestling a vampire. I started having fun and I started to get a little optimistic after that intro that I thought was just a failure.
The intro, that I feel the exact same way, Bruce. When I was watching, I was just like, the intro just had that feeling of like, oh boy, we are about to walk into a disaster here. But you're right, by Mexico and that whole match and everything, I was just like, okay, no, I get what we're doing here, and it was fun. And I'll be honest, I was amazed at how quickly I kind of took to David Harbour as Hellboy. It's like, yeah, you know. The Ron Perlman thing is the Ron Perlman thing, and you're just going to have to get past that or not. You know what I mean? And yeah. I'd rather try to get past it and enjoy the film that I'm watching than to sit there the whole time going, that's not Ron. That's not going to help you. That's not going to make you have a good time at the movies. And ultimately, I don't care who you are, your chances are when you go to watch a movie, you're hoping to enjoy it. Right.
And you know, with all the makeup and all the prosthetics and the character of Hellboy has such a distinct look that it should be easy to get past. The comparison I make, you know, Peter Mayhew was Chewbacca for so long, but it shouldn't matter because he's inside this fuzzy suit. That the minute they put somebody else in the Chewbacca suit, I felt like I could tell. You know, it was just like that weird thing. And then you get used to it and you move on. But it did take me a little getting used to. But just imagine, Adam, Sean, I don't know how you felt about the luchador thing, but imagine how much better your mood would be if this movie just started with the luchador stuff and you didn't have that King Arthur flashback, and they could definitely work a little exposition in later in the movie, like as they're collecting the pieces, somebody explains in a line or two what's going on. I don't think you need the whole flashback. We know who King Arthur is.
That would have been fine, I thought.
Well, here is I'm going to hijack the show for a little bit here. Because, yes, the Arthurian opening is clunky and weird. When they get to the wrestling and you know that something is up and he likes the guy that he's about to wrestle, and all of that stuff is super fun. And it is the only fun part of this movie. It is the only part of the movie where you're like, oh, wow, I really, you know, I could see myself getting into it if it's more like this. Here is the problem. There are two fundamental flaws with this movie. One is David Harbour is totally serviceable and fine as Hellboy. And as much as I know that there are the fans who will never like this movie because it's not Ron Perlman, I do not have a problem with that. I think that David Harbour is a fine person to have as your Hellboy. He's kind of a little bit the type already, you know. It's not what the internet is on fire about right now.
It's not like Rick Moranis plays Hellboy, you know?
Right. He's totally serviceable as Hellboy. Here is one of the two massive fundamental problems with this movie, and it's in the script. Hellboy, the thing that makes Hellboy work so well as a comic book, as a character in that comic book and in the last two movies, is that Hellboy is a blue-collar, work-a-day guy. He is tired half the time because he's constantly traveling. He's constantly in situations where he's over his head. He talks like a plumber.
Another thing that I think makes Hellboy endearing from the comics and a little bit from Ron Perlman's portrayal is also that this is a guy that looks like the devil himself, but he's kind of got the heart of a 13-year-old Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I mean, he's got the edge to him like a 13-year-old is, but he's still like, he might complain about doing it, but as soon as he sees the cat stuck in the tree or the old lady needing to cross the road, he jumps to help.
Yes. And to finish my point, this version of Hellboy is not the blue collar work a day, you know, like I've got the world on my shoulders. I've got a lot of demands placed upon me and I'm still doing it anyway. You feel none of that with this version of Hellboy. Hellboy is basically somebody who complains constantly. Other characters bring up how much he constantly complains. You never get the feeling of, oh, this dude is really one of us. They portray him as an outsider who, because of reasons, decides to be on the side of angels. There's no proof of why he is that way. That, you know, the way that his father raises him is he raises him as an outsider, not that he's one of us. He says he loves him. There's no proof of that until he actually says the words "I love you" when he's already dead. That it is a fundamental flaw, and it's the people who wrote the script not understanding who Hellboy is in the first place to make a good, enjoyable movie. I don't give a crap about this version of Hellboy. This character of Hellboy, I don't care where he goes. I don't care if he gets hurt. And it's because they do not have the character fully fleshed out for this movie.
I think you pointed out something that I didn't like, that I couldn't figure out exactly why I didn't like, because this movie definitely, as far as plot and story, follows the comics very closely, but they totally miss the characterization on all three of the principal characters. And I don't think that I realized that that's what felt off about it until you just kind of pointed that out.
It's because there's no stakes for you as you're watching it. There's nothing about this character where you really want him to succeed. He's just an outsider who proves who wants to be loved, but why?
You're right. He doesn't really endear himself to the audience in any real way that we saw in the other two films. And this isn't even an actor thing. It's you're right. It's a story thing. But we're not giving anything that's being let in and just going like, hey, here's how you can relate to this guy or understand more of where this guy is coming from. You're absolutely right.
Instead of being a devil with a heart of gold, he's just a devil with a regular old devil's heart.
He's just like, boy.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't get any of that sweet, lovable vulnerability that he's really still kind of a child on the inside.
I could not picture this Hellboy picking up a cat.
It's like the way that Mike Mignola has described Hellboy's physiology and development is like he goes from being a baby to being 17 in the course of about 5 years, but then he kind of gets stuck in that 17 to 19 is going to take about 100 years. And that's why he acts the way he does, but he's still sweet on the inside. And here you get the idea he's already 40 and just bitter.
It just feels like he's a gravelly old man. Yeah.
Yeah. But I have gone on the record ever since, I think, the early days of HMP. If you go all the way back to when we did the I, Frankenstein review, which had to be the first year, right?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I've been on the record as letting people know that I love Baba Yaga. So we do get some sweet. This might be the best Baba Yaga depiction in a motion picture that I've seen in a long time.
I loved it. I thought it was like the makeup job was great. It was super creepy and everything. Everything about that was a good job.
They had Baba Yaga's hut. The reason I love Baba Yaga is because when I'm like a sixth grader and I've got the Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons books. I'm talking, first edition here. They had in the Monster Manual, or maybe it was in Legends and Lore, they had Baba Yaga's hut, which is this house with chicken legs. And from that moment on, I said, man, if there's a character in all of mythology I love, it's got to be the witch in a house with chicken legs. And man, if they didn't even give us the hut, which, what's the point of having Baba Yaga if you don't have the hut? That was awesome.
Hey, Sean.
Well, that part is okay. That part's fine. But it's the same. It's one of the fundamental flaws with this movie is, did you for a second think that Hellboy was going to give her one of his eyes?
Well, no, because that's another one of those things lifted directly from the comics. I saw him make that deal in the comics, and the deal plays out exactly the same way there. And it's funny because it's also one of those things that's hanging over his head, because every time Baba Yaga shows up in a comic, the reason she's there is to claim his eye. And, if this were something that was going to spawn a franchise with, let's say, 11 sequels, then that might be funny. But I don't know that we're going to get that.
What are you talking about?
It's got
a $12 million opening weekend. What are you talking about? This is headed straight for the multiplex yet again on a yearly basis, just as we do with Star Wars.
Well, this isn't even one of those movies where it's going to find its audience. Not really, because there are different versions of this style of movie that are done far, far better.
This is like the total inverse of Dread.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. Total inverse of Dread here. But what did you think when we first get to meet Ben Daimio? First off, did he really need to be British? I mean, couldn't he have just been like a CIA operative in London? I mean, I don't understand why, as faithful as they are with the comics on so many things, I don't understand why they decided to Ben Daimio British. And because he was British in the script, they cast a British actor, and then there was some pushback about the ethnicity of the character versus the one in the movie. So they go ahead and bring in an Asian actor, but they still leave him British. And it's like change just for change's sake. I don't understand why they felt they needed to make Ben British.
Well, let's. I have no answer to that, and I have no real ideas to. I couldn't even formulate a guess. I will say this though. You mentioned this in the connection and everything of they dropped Ed. Well, he said he dropped out himself, Ed Skrein.
Yeah.
So you go applaud the guy for that. But we got Daniel Day Kim out of this, and that guy is awesome. He's awesome in like everything that he's in. And at that point, I was just like, I didn't even know he was in this because I ignored the trailers on purpose. And when I saw him, I was like, oh, perfect. He's awesome in everything he's in. I'm on board.
But I just really like the idea of Ben from the comics. Ben as a U.S. Marine, it all just makes more sense to me. And like I said, I know that the story, they're in London and it's tied to King Arthur, but there's no reason Ben couldn't have been from the U.S. government.
Well, there is a reason. The reason is because he needs to get into certain buildings, and the only way he's going to know it is if he works for British intelligence. Because there's two different buildings they have to walk into that he only has access to because he works for the British government. But it's because the script demands him to get into those buildings without a firefight, without any of that stuff, that he can literally walk in and bring Hellboy in with him.
But man, there's nothing that seems to make less sense to me than a English were-jaguar.
Well, I kept. It's funny, man, because I read Hellboy when it first came out. Like I probably read, let's say, the first 5 trades, and they were great. I loved them. Right up until BPRD starts, I read a couple of BPRD things, and then I was out on all this entire universe after that. And so I don't know these characters. I don't know the Ben character. I knew Lobster Johnson because he kept showing up from time to time, even in the original stuff.
Lobster's like day one type supporting character.
Right. But I didn't recognize anyone else. I don't know the character that he saves as a baby. I don't know the Asian guy who turns into a big cat. And I don't know any of these characters.
In the comics, Ben came along after, I'd say a good time after like Liz and Abe Sapien, like a lot of the supporting characters had felt a little stale and they wanted to do some rotation. And also I think it was because True Blood was kind of popular and there's a were-jaguar or a were-panther or something on that show. I honestly believe that influenced Ben's creation. But Alice came into the comics just as a way, in my opinion, just as a way for Mike Mignola to draw attention to the fact that look at this little odd indie comic. It's actually been around so long that the baby from this story is an adult now. So let's reintroduce her and just pay a little tip of the hat to the people who've been reading this since 1993, that now we suddenly have the baby in 1993. Well, look, it's 2005. She's 22 years old now.
That's cool. But that also brings me to the question, where the hell is Bob the Homunculus? I love that character.
I feel like he would have been in the sequel that probably won't be made for this. Yeah. But I really feel like part of what they wanted to do here was say, Del Toro just kind of fixated on some of his favorite characters. And for all the good that Del Toro did, he really, really didn't feel limited at all to the storylines in the comics. I mean, the whole angle that he took with Hellboy and Liz is absolutely zero like what's in the comics.
Right.
And I think that this creative crew probably would have given us Roger the Homunculus, by the way.
It's Roger. That's right. Roger.
Yeah, but Roger the Homunculus probably would have shown up in the next one in sort of the same role that Johann Kraus filled in Hellboy 2, the Del Toro version.
Right. And I like their version of him in that movie.
Yeah. I feel like that they were trying to put some feelers out into the larger Hellboy universe with this one instead of just giving us more of the same, and probably smart. I mean, if you're Neil Marshall and you're making this movie, you probably don't want to go out of your way to draw comparisons to Del Toro in your first outing with Hellboy.
Well, definitely not. I mean, Neil Marshall's a good director, but there's a reason why even just casual movie fans know Guillermo del Toro's name. He's magnificent at his job.
And now an Academy Award winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he made Peter Pan the best Peter Pan, or was Pan's Labyrinth the Peter Pan movie? I don't know, but
it wasn't.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but
he wants that one with Hugh Jackman that was real good. Ugh.
And Adam, I know that you said you were not aware that Daniel Day Kim was in this. I was, because I read the articles about Ed Skrein leaving, and they mentioned that Daniel Day Kim had been cast to take his place. What I didn't know is that Mila Jovovich was in this, and it's not even directed by Paul W.S. Anderson.
I don't think she's with him
shocking.
anymore.
He must be getting money somewhere, though, for this movie.
I don't think they're together anymore.
What?
Oh,
I don't
but
think
he still directs the Resident Evil movies, right?
I guess I don't know. I don't think that. I thought I heard something about. Again, I don't follow Hollywood gossip, but I was to understand that I don't think they're together anymore.
Well, maybe it's because she did this movie without him and he got mad.
You went and did a Neil Marshall movie. I'm out of here.
But,
How dare you be in a good movie?
I think that it's fair to say two things about my relationship with Mila Jovovich. Number one, I am a fan. Number two, it's probably just because of Fifth Element, but I still consider it a plus if she's in the movie. So I was shocked to see her showing up as Nimue,
Multipass.
Exactly. I've got a multipass.
I'll be. I've never really been a big fan of her. I don't think she's a very good actress. I think she's very pretty, but that's about as far as she goes.
I like her.
She looks like an alien. She looks like a sexy alien.
Yeah.
I believe her as a Blood Queen, Lady of the Lake type.
Multipass. I don't. So
I like how succinctly you summed up your feelings.
You're wrong.
So here is the other fundamental problem with this movie. All right, let's take something what's a perfect example is watching Shazam last week, right? So Shazam last week, when we watched that movie works in double layers. So the character of Shazam, or Billy, to be more precise, Billy has to let go of the baggage of his mom and come to terms that it's your family who saves you. And his family, once he realizes that that he's not fighting who his family is anymore, he then is able to empower himself with his family, literally and figuratively, in that movie. And so that is what makes the plot for that movie work so well, because you're getting a double whammy from the same thing. Your plot elements and your character arc is the same arc, and you can hit it at different times, and it's very, very satisfying when you see that. When in this movie, basically what this movie is telling you is that Hellboy has to make a choice between wanting to rule the world or wanting to save humanity, and it's one or the other. However, the way the plot in this movie works, he has absolutely no agency as a character. This character, all of his decisions are made for him by someone else. And so he falls from thing to thing, like it literally sometimes, where he just gets pulled from one thing to the next, and it's never his decision. And so the entire plot of the movie it keeps being run by other people other than Hellboy. Like, he doesn't get to make the decision to fight the giants. He doesn't get to make the decision to fight the witch. These are all made for him. So he doesn't ever have any agency as a character. So at the end of the movie, when he has to decide whether or not he wants to save humanity or be, the ruler of the world, it's not nearly as satisfying, because he hasn't had agency this entire movie, and now he finally has agency to make a decision. It's completely and utterly unsatisfying.
He doesn't even have the agency to be left alone. He doesn't we don't even hear him just going, look, I just don't want anything to do with this. We don't even get that much.
Right. And they don't even hit it as it would be fine if this movie didn't end with him having to make a decision. So if let's say it works like Indiana Jones, right? Because Indiana Jones doesn't have any agency either in that first movie. He goes from thing to thing to thing, and they make it a plot point of how lucky he is to be able to escape this stuff. They don't even write that into the plot of this movie of wow, you barely escaped that one with your life, Hellboy, because Hellboy is basically indestructible. And it makes this movie so unbelievably boring that even when you're watching mass chaos on screen, and it's a very, very loud movie too, where everyone's screaming and shrieking and things are on fire and there's alarms going off and there's bombs going off and there's fire everywhere. And it doesn't matter. I'm still falling asleep watching this movie because it's so bloody boring, because there's no stakes. He has no agency as a character, and you're basically just being pushed along from scene to scene because that's what the script dictates.
Now, I wasn't necessarily bored like you were, Sean. I will agree that it was loud, and something that I kind of remember making a mental note of is that the music, though oftentimes it's music that I like that they're using, the music really feels obtrusive, and the mix was a little off, like a little too much volume on the music compared to the rest of the sound. I mean, it feels like somebody's playing the music over top of the movie and not as part of the movie at times.
Right.
I did feel that the music was a little obtrusive, but I do like spectacle. I'm pretty darn happy. Like, I'm easy to please. You don't have to try to give me a huge, massive plot as long as you have Hellboy in a series of confrontations with creatures from folklore, specifically maybe lesser known creatures from folklore, not the ones that we know a ton about already. People like Baba Yaga and like the Duodendanon and some of the She. You put him in those things, that's the recipe that works so well for Mike Mignola. His Hellboy stories that are sort of self-contained, not only one-shots, but like if he can tell two 10-page stories in one comic, the shorter form really works better when Mignola does it. And I think with the movie, you just kind of have those vignettes that add up to a movie. I would be happier with it. But I do agree that there's no real character arc. And what should happen is Hellboy finds the strength within himself to resist the call of destiny, but instead they have to have his recently deceased father come back, or adoptive father come back, and tell him that that's who he is, instead of just having him say, "Nah, I call the shots this time," and cutting her head off.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree. The other part to this too is that, you know, there's not those really great little scenes that the other two Hellboy movies have. There isn't that scene in this movie where he digs up the body so that the body can tell him where to go find this.
Yeah, like that's the corpse. One of the same story in which he rescues the baby. I mean, it's right. Probably the most well received Hellboy story of all time.
It's such a great scene, and it's a great story. It's one of the first ones. So the other scene, the other thing I'm thinking of is in Hellboy 2 Golden Army, where he gets into a fight with that one monster and he breaks the guy's hand, and then after the fight is over, the monster is like, he's talking to the monster afterward. He's like, "Hey, what was that all about?" And the monster, without saying words, goes, "You broke my hand." Like, it was so funny, like such a great little moment. There is nothing even remotely close to that in this movie.
I want to say, I think you're right, and I'm going to kind of piggyback that, is that we never had that Hellboy, and I'm not saying this is something specifically that he said, but we never had that, like, oh boy, kind of moment from him ever.
Right.
And we didn't have the quirks. You know, we didn't have a single pet cat. We didn't have any of the little weird things that make Hellboy, I don't think human is the right term, but, you know, you see more to him than just when he's on the job.
Right. He loves chili and chocolate and
I was about to say,
cereal.
Junk food really would have started to explain why. I'm sorry. Listen, I'm sure David Haber got into some shape. That's fine. He's still that guy underneath. That's a suit, buddy. That's it.
Yeah. My 11-year-old son did point out when Hellboy has no shirt on and we see him from behind, he's like, "Wow, he got fat."
There's a couple of scenes where you see him and you're just like, "Oh, okay. Was this at the beginning or the end of the shoot?" Because I bet it was one or the other.
Did you guys like Alice in this movie?
Yes, very much so. Actually, I like that character.
I like the character in the movie maybe a little bit better than in the comics, but the one thing, and they didn't portray this in the movie at all, it's baggage I bring from the comics, but she seemed just a little too young. I mean, it makes sense with the timeline, but knowing that Hellboy's supposed to fall in love with her, it was weird because, man, she really seems younger than she is.
And she's diminutive in size. That doesn't help things.
Yeah, that part's okay, but and then I really
I'm just saying, you add one on top of the other, it makes it, you know.
And then I had some fun when she found out she could punch ghosts, basically, and then they really played it up in that final action scene of the movie, kind of the not quite an epilogue, but almost. But I like the actress. I like that they changed up the character a little bit for the movie, but she really man, she came across as like 19 instead of 22, 23, 24, 25.
Yeah. Yeah, she's. But I didn't even see her as a love interest at all for Hellboy in this movie.
And I think that was a smart thing to do. Yeah, I definitely think that was a smart thing to do because David Harbour, I don't know how old he is, but he looks older than me.
He's like mid-40s, I would think.
Yeah, he's around our age.
Well, I'm glad to know I'm not the only person showing my age in the world.
Well, you know who was great in this movie is Thomas Hayden Church. Thomas Hayden Church as Lobster Johnson. You cannot cast that better.
I'm with you. I never would have dreamed that that's the perfect person to play him, but I'll be darned if he isn't.
Well, he has no, like, there's no voice modulation. He's always super loud. And so when you're playing a World War II superhero, yeah, that works. Totally works.
He's like the dark Captain America. I like it.
And I always liked that character too. I think it's such a cool character. I wish they would have used him more, but I know why they didn't.
But talking about casting against expectations, Ian McShane.
That's where I wanted to go next. Yeah.
As Trevor, man, that was jarring, but I've always liked Ian McShane. I mean, he made a movie here in my hometown, so I got to like the guy. But boy, he is a very different take on Brutenholm.
Yeah, I didn't. That's the big thing is, like, it didn't feel like that was the character. It felt like we had another character that we just called Broom, you know?
If anything, man, I feel like Ian McShane should have been one of the bad guys in the Osiris Club.
Yes,
he's a great bad guy.
He should have been the leader of the Osiris Club.
Yeah, he makes a good villain.
If they really, really wanted to, like, do something, because here's the other problem I have with this movie. But first, let me get to the thing where I'm piggybacking on your idea, Bruce. Is that if you really want to throw things up in the air, you make the dude that they got rid of for Hellboy 2, you make him the leader of the BPRD and make him Hellboy's dad. Okay, part 2. So let me get to the other thing. Another problem with this is that when you're trying to do something, new, when you're trying to pave your own way with this character, come up with some new ideas, come up with something new and inventive for this character. There is literally nothing new about this thing. You're using different characters, yes, but that is about the only thing that is different. Like there's no new take, there's no new ideas, there's no new thoughts. Like it's the same ground. I mean, we even see the dude from Hellboy 1 that everybody loves so much, including myself. That's the Clockwork Man. Like what are we doing here? Let's see something else. Let's see something new and fresh and inventive. It's the reason why you have this project in the first place.
But you see, they made Ben English.
Yeah, well, I did see that, and that is new and inventive for sure. But I mean, the box. Where is the fresh take? Like, where is the new thought? Like, oh, you know what? I never thought about that with Hellboy before. That would be a thing, wouldn't it? There's none of that.
And even if you're not going to do something new, then find like what's good about the old and emulate that. It's almost like they took the lesser interesting parts of what's already been done and did it again.
Yes. Hey, let's take everything that was cool about the first 2 movies and get rid of it so we can make some dark thing where we can see Hellboy slash off arms and cut necks
or even better, look at what made that luchador scene in the beginning of the movie work so well and do a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I had a massive problem with him killing his friend. That is also a problem for me. I don't think that the character of Hellboy, I think would have done anything he could to be able to save his friend. You know, he doesn't do that. I know it's a mistake that he didn't mean to kill him.
And also, yeah,
he sure gets over it really quick too.
I think he subdues his friend. If we're looking at true Hellboy, he subdues his friend, gets him back to the BPRD where, you know, converting a vampire to an agent is not that big a deal for them.
Right. There you go.
Let's impale him.
But I do want to point out the positives because I'm getting the idea I like this movie better than you did, Sean, which doesn't mean I liked it a ton, just I liked it better than you did. Part of that might be because my expectations were set low, but I thought this before I heard the budget, but then you add to the fact that this budget was $50 million. I really like the effects. I really like the creature work. I really enjoyed a lot of how things looked in this movie.
Yeah, the effects are good. I agree with you there. Yeah, the effects are good. There really isn't many moments where you're like, oh, come on. Some of the choices are great. The way that the giants look, their design, that looks cool.
And I have a feeling this movie is also destined to be on one of those internet lists you see a couple times a year of movies that were way too confident they would get a sequel that they never got. Because, man, the end of this movie is 3 separate setups for a sequel.
Yeah.
These days, though, I think you kind of got to, you got to Babe Ruth it, man. You got to point to the stands and just be like, look, we're gonna give it a shot. Might not work, but hey, we're
waiting for the sequel to this and the sequel to I, Frankenstein that was set up.
Oh my good Lord!
Maybe they joined forces.
Give me 50 of these before I get one more of those I, Frankenstein movies.
I was the one who said I, Frankenstein could have used a few Baba Yagas in it. But Abe Sapien, aside from Hellboy, and maybe not even aside from Hellboy, but the most talked about, most beloved character from the original duo of movies was Abe Sapien. There's talk about the fact that they used David Hyde Pierce for his voice in the first movie and then let Doug Jones do it in the second. The fact that when I saw the first trailer for Shape of Water, I thought it was an Abe Sapien prequel movie. I mean, I even
asked you because after you had seen it, I said, is this Abe Sapien? And you even said yes.
I still, in my mind, it was. But, it's not, sadly. But Abe Sapien, the first part of the movie, you're like, well, this is like making a Santa Claus movie without Rudolph in it. And then you kind of like, okay, I'm getting into it. They're doing their own thing. There's no way that you want to go head to head with Del Toro on a fish person. I mean, Del Toro on his grave when he finally passes away, it's just going to say he did fish people like nobody's business. That's what it's going to say. But then they go, and at the very end of the movie, they have this little adventure in like Siberia or somewhere, and it's fun just seeing the 3 of them working together, kicking butt. We really get to see Alice come into her own as an operative like we're used to in some of the later comics, and I love that. And then the whole reason they're there is to retrieve Abe Sapien. So there's the fanboy me that says, yes, Abe Sapien is going to be in the sequel. Then there's the me that's like, yeah, there's not going to be a sequel. And then there's the me that goes, wait, why didn't we have more Abe Sapien? Like, either you're avoiding the comparison or you're not. You don't avoid it at the last possible moment where it's like, this movie was pretty good. Oh, Abe Sapien. Yeah, that was better.
If you do it again, we'll give you that Abe Sapien you always wanted.
But even just the hand, I know that whatever plans they had for an Abe Sapien would not have looked nearly as good as Abe Sapien.
No, it can't. It can't. It was just done too well.
It was.
Now, the $10 million question. Did this movie need not 1, but 2 end credit scenes?
I don't mind these things.
Yeah, man, I do, because this was one I was ready to get up and go pee. I mean, I enjoyed the movie well enough, and I really liked like that little scene they had at the end with Abe Sapien. That was all the stinger you needed, but then they gave us 2 more.
What?
Yeah, for the record, I did not stick around, but in a mid-credit scene, according to my sources, Hellboy meets Lobster Johnson at his dad's grave, and they talk.
Yeah, I did see that one, yeah.
And then there's a post-credit scene with Baba Yaga. I mean, I didn't stick around for my favorite character from the movie, Baba Yaga, to show back up again. But she shows up and asks another ghost to help her go get that eye from Hellboy.
Yeah, an unnamed figure. We don't know who.
Well, it's Koshi, who's from the comics. Yeah. The idea is Koshi can't die, but he wants to. And if she helps him, she will bless him with death.
Oh, there you go.
Aha.
Now, before we get to this stuff, I do want to. We got an email.
Oh, nice.
Let's hear it.
This comes from my friend Justin, and he actually will be on the Film Find when Godzilla comes out. We love reviewing the Godzilla movies and those big monster movies together, and he's really deep in on all that kind of good stuff. So here's his email. To Adam, Bruce, and Sean. Hi, guys. I wanted to share my thoughts about the new Hellboy movie. I'm a longtime Hellboy fan and having been introduced to the character in 2004 via the first Del Toro film. Shortly afterwards, I snatched up the first several trade paperbacks of the comic and quickly fell in love with creator Mike Mignola's signature art style and folk lore-infused storytelling and have been following the comic ever since. Once I started reading the comic, it became evident quite very quickly that Del Toro films were very different incarnation of the same universe. I think it's entirely appropriate to say that the two Del Toro Hellboy films are not so much adapted from Mignola's comics as they are inspired by it. I bring up this point because the new Hellboy film, directed by Neil Marshall and written by Andrew Cosby, is very much a more direct adaptation of Mignola's comics, quite a few of them actually. By my count, I see elements from no less than 8 different Hellboy comics, including the primarily the Wild Hunt, all the stuff with the Giant Hunt, the Storm and the Fury, all the stuff with Nimue and I can't read these names. Nimue and Arthurian mythology, but also to a lesser extent, Seeds of Destruction, Hellboy's origin, The Corpse, Alice's backstory, Darkness Calls, the scenes between Baba Yaga and Hellboy in Mexico, the Luchador Vampire, as well as BPRD, The Killing Grounds, Ben's backstory. Needless to say, this is a lot of material to try and cover in 121 minutes. Too much. There are a lot of things about which one could criticize this new Hellboy. None of the jokes land and the music is awful. The special effects are inconsistent, and I'm not sure who Ian McShane is supposed to be, but he is not Trevor, yes. But I think at the end of the day, perhaps the biggest problem this film has is that it's trying to be too slavishly faithful to the comics. The comics and the film are, needless to say, two very different mediums. There are things that you can get away with in comics that simply don't work in film, and vice versa. Marshall and Cosby are apparently big fans of Hellboy. I don't doubt that. But like Peter Jackson with his 2005 remake of King Kong, I think they went overboard, feeling like they had to cram every possible thing they could from the source material and then add more on top of that. The result is an unwieldy cinematic train wreck buried under a mountain of allusions and homages and references to the point that narratively, I can't imagine this movie making a lick of sense to anyone except the most dyed-in-the-wool fanboys watching. My girlfriend, who is no stranger to superhero comics and movies, but has never read a Hellboy book, didn't have a clue as what was going on half the time, and she was trying her best. So, what about this movie does work, if anything? I think David Harbour does a good job filling in for Ron Perlman. I was sold on the idea of Harbour as Hellboy from start because of his work on Stranger Things, and I still stand by that assessment. He apparently was very invested in playing the character and spent long hours on the phone with Mignola trying to get inside Hellboy's head. Apparently, he was the only one who cared about what Mignola had to say, as Marshall evidently only spoke to him about twice before filming began. I also thought Jovovich was good as the Blood Queen, and I'm very happy that they went with Daniel Day Kim, an Asian American, as Domino, as an Asian American character, instead of Ed Skrein, which they originally were planning. This that's one case where where fidelity to the source material was a good thing. I like seeing certain scenes from the comics brought to life on the big screen, but overall, I wish they had a better movie. This new Hellboy movie is already on its way to bombing at the box office, and in a bigger way than the first two Hellboy movies did, which is what necessitated, that's a tough word for me, this reboot in the eyes of the producers to begin with. I doubt we'll ever get to see that third film in Del Toro's imagined trilogy, but crazier things have happened. Until then, fans like me still have Mignola's amazing comic series, and if this film somehow gets more people to read those books, then I guess we can call this movie a win, at least in one way. All the best, Justin Mullis. And if you'd like to check out more of Justin's writing, check out, just go to Tumblr and search for Man Creates Dinosaur. He's got a lot of writing and stuff on that, more on Hellboy and a whole bunch of other neat things. Thanks for the email, Justin.
Can I just comment a little bit?
Please.
I think he's right about him cramming too much in, and I think I know why they did it. I think this is like a case of reverse engineering. Like, I feel like whoever the creative vision was behind this reboot decided that they wanted the third movie in a planned trilogy to be Hellboy in Hell. The problem is Hellboy in Hell came after 20 years of Hellboy comics. So to get to that final destination of Hellboy in Hell being the name of your third movie, you got to cram a lot in the front. And you can't tell the Sound and the Fury without explaining who Alice is. So they got to cram some of that in. And then you need Baba Yaga here because her having it out for Hellboy leads to Hellboy in Hell. You've got a lot of stuff that took 20 years to lay out in the comics that suddenly they're like, okay, well, this first movie is just going to be this is going to be the required reading to get to what we want our third movie to be. And because of the approach they took, I don't think they're ever going to get to that vision of Hellboy in Hell as their third movie.
Pretty much. And of course, as always, if you guys would like to send us emails about anything, heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. Well, before we get to our actual rating of this thing, there's one important question that we have to ask ourselves, and it's the question that we ask ourselves every single episode here of HMP, is how does this movie relate to Sylvester Stallone?
We really do. We really do ask ourselves the hard questions, like how does this movie relate back to Sylvester Stallone? Well, thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Yeah. Lawrence Gordon was one of 15 producers on Hellboy 2019, which is probably about 12 more producers than there probably should be. When Lawrence Gordon was a producer on the movie Lock Up, which starred Sylvester Stallone, there's only 6 producers on that movie, and Lock Up is easily one of the best top 200 prison movies ever made. There has to be some sort of connection there. Lawrence Gordon has worked on other projects as well, most notably the movie Brewster's Millions, a movie where Richard Pryor has to spend $30 million in 30 days, which sounds like Mr. Pryor may have been able to pull from his personal experience, if I'm to believe his autobiography. Why haven't they remade this movie? Wish casting, Terry Crews in the Richard Pryor role, and John McEnroe. That's right, that John McEnroe in the John Candy role. And there you have it, HMPers. Your Stallone connection this week is Lawrence Gordon. Thank you. I'm Sean Kovacs. Thank you.
To his friends, he's called Larry. Well, here on Hero Movie Podcast, we don't do stars or letters or ratings of that nature. No, we've got our own silly rating. It's called the Robin Rating System. And if you'd like to check that out, head on over to Facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the screen, and throw us a like while you're over there. Bruce, where does Hellboy 2019 fall on the Robin Rating System for you, sir?
Well, I like this movie better than you guys did. At least I did before talking to you guys. I think maybe
that's happened to me before.
Maybe my opinion drifted a little bit. But the first thing I'll say is if instead of this being a theatrical release, if this had been dropped on Netflix like Death Note, I think I would have liked it better. Honestly, I think I would have not held it to theatrical release standards. I think it could have been cool and something fun. You know, I probably would have really had a lot more positive to say if it had just sort of been released direct to Netflix or something similar.
Y'all know them $50 million
Prime,
Netflix movies they be putting out all the time.
I mean, if imagine we go to Amazon Prime and my choice is season 2 of The Tick or this new Hellboy 2019, you know, I'd probably be a little more excited about it. Didn't have to pay for movie prices and popcorn and stuff like that. But I still had fun. I had fun because I was expecting it to just be an absolute disaster. And to me, it was passable. And if this had been released to Netflix, I'd feel almost certain there's going to be a sequel. Now I think there's no chance there's a sequel for this thing. But I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. I think that if you just go in for a little spectacle, that this works on the level that comic book movies worked on 20 years ago. But it's not ever going to be held up favorably to the Del Toro movies. I still give it a decent Damian Wayne. I think there's some people that can have fun with it when it comes out on HBO or streaming or Amazon Prime or wherever you're going to be able to see it at home. Probably just not worth the trip to the theater.
Yeah. Sean?
I hate this movie. I hate it. And it's no fault. It's no fault of David Harbour. And the special effects are, like Bruce said, are very good in this movie. But this is uninspired garbage. This movie, to me. If I'm falling asleep in your gigantic, very, very loud movie, you are doing it wrong. And so for me, this movie's a Jason Todd.
Yeah, was it? This movie's not perfect. It's got a lot of flaws in it, and it's tough for me because people know that I see everything. So people ask me all the time. It's just like, oh, have you seen Hellboy? You seen this? You seen that? And so they want to get my thoughts on it because I'm that canary in the coal mine. Like, what did you think? And as many problems as I have with this movie, one of the big ones, and we didn't talk about it too much, but you guys are right. The soundtrack is pretty awful. I think all the like rock music and stuff, I think it sucks. I'm like,
why are we listening to "Kickstart My Heart"?
First of all,
Motley Crue?
"Kickstart My Heart" by Motley Crue is the best song in this entire movie.
And that's a bad song.
And that's not even
it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah, not a bad song in and of itself, but when it's 4 decibels louder than the rest of the movie and thrown into a movie called Hellboy, it's weird.
But that was fine. At least that was like nice and pumping and like that's a good song to have a fight scene to. The rest of the stuff I'm listening to, I'm like, what is this garbage? It sounds like crap. But there's a lot of it does, a lot of things don't work for it. But there was something about it, I don't know, that I kind of liked more than I thought that I would. Again, I think it's a very flawed movie. I think that it could have been done a lot better had someone else been going, behind the scenes and everything. But I'm with Bruce. I kind of got it. I'm going like a high Damian Wayne, despite all of its very many flaws, of which there are many. So
the best thing that could happen is a Lobster spinoff.
Oh, without a doubt, it's the only thing that I would have been like, oh yeah, I totally see
now,
that. Now
that's a Netflix special. So
it's never going to happen.
No, it's not. But you know what is going to happen? We're going to come back here next week with yet another movie. We have our Patreon vote next week, and you guys have picked right because and also next weekend is my birthday, and you guys have blessed me with talking about Captain America: Winter Soldier, and let me tell you, I don't know that I could have gotten a better gift from you guys because we're going to have a lot of fun with that one. In the meantime, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
Just go to your local police blotter.
Man found in gorilla suit.
That'll do it. Or go to Chubby Wizard.
No questions asked. Sean?
You can find me at heromoviepodcast.com. Also, we have another podcast that's going to be coming up very soon. Correct?
Indeed,
the Preacher podcast.
Preacher's coming back, man. One more season. We're gonna round it out, man.
And it's not far away, right? I mean, we start up again in what, a month, 2 months?
Oh, I didn't even know they announced today.
August.
Oh, it's August, so it is a ways away.
Okay, a little bit of ways away, but hey, it's all those seasons 1 through 3 are available out right now. So why don't you go and check those out? Catch up, listen to the podcast, hear our stirring conversations about that and all the other kind of good stuff, and we'll be jumping back into that not too awful long. So
we'll only be about 3 episodes deep when we go to Dragon Con.
Yeah. So we'll have all that kind of fun stuff going in, and so that's it, everybody. Join us next week for a little movie called Captain America: Winter Soldier. And until then, for Sean Koufax, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.